It's firmware update time again. GoPro just released the next major firmware update for the Hero 10 on December 15th. And in today's video, I'm going to tell you about the new features that GoPro packed into that firmware update. This is firmware update version 1.20, and if you saw my video back in November, a lot of the features in this new firmware update were released in the beta firmware update. So if you did try out the beta firmware update, a lot of these features you've already tested out, but firmware version 1.20 is the official release of this firmware update. So this time you don't have to take your micro SD card out, hook it into a computer, and do the firmware update. This time you can simply connect your GoPro through the Quick app on your mobile device and push the firmware update. Much easier that way. So let's dive into what this firmware update offers. The first thing it offers is it does offer the Max Lens Mod compatibility officially now. That beta firmware did offer it about a month ago, but GoPro has now officially offered it. So Max Lens Mod compatibility is there. It is still, of course, 2.7K max resolution with the Max Lens Mod. You cannot go any higher than 2.7K, and that's simply a limitation of the resolution on here. In order to have more than 2.7K while spinning this camera entirely around, you would have to have a sensor that offers much higher than 5.3K resolution. So we're not quite there yet with the GoPro. Maybe on the GoPro 11, we'll see. In addition to the Max Lens Mod, GoPro did add several additional frame rates on a few different resolutions. On 5K 4x3, GoPro did add the 24 frames per second. On 4K 4x3, GoPro did add the 30, the 25, and the 24 frames per second. On 5.3K, GoPro did add the 24 frames per second. I consider that one of the most significant frame rates that they added. That allows you to get that nice 24 frames per second cinematic footage in the highest resolution offered on this camera now. So I was very happy to see that one added. GoPro did also add the 24 frames per second on the 1080p resolution as well. In addition, GoPro did add the Superview lens in the 5.3K 60 and 30 frames per second now. So now you can use that 5.3K in 60 frames and 30 frames and have that same nice super wide super view that you can have in 24 frames per second. Now, some other performance improvements that GoPro added, and this one may be the most significant. GoPro did add the reduction of highlight clipping. Now, if you don't know what that means, highlight clipping is when you're filming in a setting where it's very bright, like a bright sunny day. And highlight clipping is where you don't get all of that detail in certain things that are overexposed. So frequently that's going to be seen in the clouds in the sky. If it's a bright sunny day and you've got a lot of those white puffy clouds up there, with highlight clipping, it's going to take away some of those details there. So GoPro has built into the camera the ability to improve that and capture more detail. I'm very interested to test that out. I'm going to be testing that out this weekend, and I want to see how much of a difference it actually makes. Because something I would do to offset this is I would put EV comp down to -0.5 or -1. But with this highlight clipping reduction, it may not be necessary to do that anymore, or I may not have to do it to as much of a degree. So I'm really curious to see what that looks like now. Another improvement with the firmware update is better battery recording estimates. In particular, that's going to apply to the new Enduro battery. So the battery estimates are supposed to be more accurate if you have the new Enduro battery installed in the Hero 10. And of course, GoPro does say that there are a lot of general bug fixes and performance improvements built into this firmware as well. GoPro does not go into detail on what those are, but if you've experienced any bugs or performance issues, I definitely encourage you to update the firmware and see if those issues are still there after updating. As always, I definitely encourage you to get the latest and greatest firmware every time it's released. The latest firmware is always going to ensure you get the most that you can out of this great camera. I'm going to be out there again in the woods this weekend shooting some more videos with this, and I'm looking forward to testing out the new features in the latest firmware to see how it does. I've also got my Enduro battery here, as I may be out there in some cold weather soon, so I'm looking forward to really putting this to the test other than just in my freezer. Well, that's all for today. Until we talk again, happy GoProing.